Hello, my name's Andy. Welcome to episode 87 of Keeping Water. Well, I'm feeling a little bit better from COVID. Not 100%, but a little bit better. So I thought what I'd do this week again is just put some video together of what I've been up to and waffle over the top of it. To start with, what I'm doing here is preparing for the lilies I bought, which are arriving about an hour after I'm doing all of this work, really. So what I bought was some textile, I think that's what they're called, plant boxes. And here you can see me very scientifically measuring them. They're meant to be 30 centimetres, but they were about 28 centimetres. So what the plan was is to use some media grid, which along with cable ties I use in about 99% of the bodging I do, really. So I was going to use the media grids to protect both the soil that the lilies' roots are in and any of the new shoots or the roots itself of the lilies from the carp who might peck away at it. So my DIY skills are amazing, as if you followed my channel you'll know, and here I am is accurately measuring 28 centimeters. I then forget to take the protective cover off the saw, so I measure again, which I am told is always the best thing to do. Measure twice, cut once, which I never do. Anyway, and here's my expert sawing, which I will speed up because it makes it look slightly better, and it would be boring just to leave it at normal speed. So what I'm basically doing here is cutting a 28 centimeter square piece of media grid to go in the top of the textile baskets. And yep, I even measure again, which is amazing, isn't it? I'm talking about it like this because by and large, when I do any kind of DIY with my pond, I bodge 90% of it. It's pretty awful. I would never use whatever I do as an example for anyone to follow. But the basic idea of what I'm trying to do is usually reasonably sound, but the execution isn't that great. Anyway, I've got my finished 28 centimeter square, which is going to go into the top of the textile basket. And as you can see, when I show now, it fits like a glove. So all that double measuring was useful. And obviously it will be more secure when there's actually some plants in it and some earth. I was also going to use some cable ties, as I said I do in all of my bodging, to hold it in place if needs be as well. And I was planning to kind of cut some holes or cut it into segments. So that's the 3 finished squares that are ready to go in the baskets. Well, that was the plan anyway, which I'll tell more about in a minute. Anyway, the other thing I thought I'd do was use some of the spare pebbles I've got that I use around the pond to maybe go into the baskets, again for a bit of protection for the plants. And the first bit was to give them a bit of a clean, get some of the dust and whatnot off them. I'm not going to show you the whole process of multiple buckets of water and whatever that I went through to clean them, but suffice to say I did it quite a few times and it worked quite well. Anyway, about an hour after all of that work, the plants actually came. Now, I wasn't sure how big they were going to be. I knew they were 3 times 3 litre pots, but I didn't imagine the lilies were going to be particularly big, but I wasn't sure how much the pot size related to the textile baskets I had. So I got 3 baskets for the 3 pots of plants that I had. But as it turned out, the pots were quite a bit smaller than the baskets, which is fine, but it meant that all the preparation work I did wasn't entirely needed. But I'll show you in a little bit exactly what it was that I did in the end. So here's me very expertly and accurately opening the bags up to have a look. As usual with plants, if you've bought plants online before, they're very often packaged a lot with newspaper, which seems to be a good way of soaking up any water that might be still in the pots to protect the cardboard box, and it was also nice and soft and I guess nice and cheap. So the plants were in a reasonable condition. The leaves were a little bit brown, but that's fine, and we're at that stage in the season for them really. So here's me looking at that and thinking that's not going to fit. Anyway, this is what I did with basket number 1, is I actually put 2 of the pots into the one basket. And then I broke up some of the square media grid that I used to fit in around the roots and the stems of the plants, and then cable tied it back together. I then cable tied the edges of the basket to the media grid and then covered some of it with stones, whilst leaving space for some of the roots to come up as well. Sorry, not the roots, some of the shoots to come up, because there were some more little shoots and I've given them some space to break through. And most of them looked okay. As I said, the leaves themselves looked a bit brown and a bit curled up. That was just a broken bit that was there already. But the stems themselves looked pretty healthy. And that was the finished article. Didn't look as good as I was planning, because things never do. But we'll see. So where I'm planning in my pond is on the right hand side. As we're looking at this screen, it's about 3.5 foot deep. And on the left in the rear corner, it's 4 foot deep, which is really where I want the lilies to go. But they're obviously a bit small, and they're really a bit small for the 3 foot bit as well. So I'm putting them in this step that I've got to the edge at the front, which I use to get in and out of the pond. And I'm just going to stick them there for a little while. So I think that's probably the best place for them for now. It does slope in towards the pond, unlike the marginal shelf. So I do kind of adjust the basket's position just to get it as stable as possible. And in the end, I add some security, which I'll talk about later as well. Now, throughout all of this, I was thinking maybe I'll fill up that black tub that I use to inspect fish in, and maybe grow them up a bit in that rather than in the pond. But I think for now, and as you'll see, I'm going to keep them in the pond for a bit and see how they get on. And I think I did a reasonable job at cleaning the gravel, because the water still looks pretty clear after I've chucked them all in. So that was really the first basket. So I'm just deciding where to put the second basket. I didn't want to put them right in front of the skimmer, although there's not a huge flow through the skimmer. It's probably more flow than I want around the lilies. So this is the second basket. What I tried with this one was different. I took the earth that the lily roots and lilies were in out of the basket they came in, and stuck them straight into the textile basket, which, as I said, is a little bit too big. So as I didn't have any more soil for them, and I didn't really want to put any more in, I filled some of the basket up with some more pebbles. And then I used a media grid with a hole in and some pebbles to plant around the roots to protect them. And then I put that on the other side of that step, and that's them in the pond. Now, I'm not really going to do anything else to them, so I'm going to hopefully leave them there. They're going to progress nicely, grow nice and strong and look quite robust, and then I'm going to move them to the right hand side where it's 3 to 3.5 foot deep, just in that corner you can see in the top right of the screen really. And they'll probably stay there. I'm not sure that I am going to move them into the really deep water, and the reason for that is because I don't have a heated or covered pond in the winter. They are going to completely die back over winter, and I'm going to cut them back to their roots really, and they're going to have to do all that growing every year. So I think it's probably better that I have them on the right side rather than over on the left in that deeper water, which is a bit of a shame because that is the place the fish like to go and feel safe in, and it would provide cover for them. But we'll see. Anyway, on to my next new arrival and purchase, and this isn't koi, although I bought it from Cotterbrook Koi Farm. It is actually a microscope. Now, you'll often be advised to get a microscope, and the major reason that people talk about getting a microscope is to aid the diagnosis of parasites in your fish. And that's obviously really good advice because it's the only way to be sure what kind of parasites you've got. And that is part of the reason why I've got it, but it's not really the primary reason. But before I get onto that, I'll talk about which one I chose. So I've got an Apex Practitioner, which, when doing a bit of Googling and asking around, seemed to be the one that came up the most in terms of recommendations. It has all the features that people say it needs to have, and it really wasn't too expensive either, which is obviously really useful because I don't have a ton of money. For me, as a non-expert, it seemed to have a really good build quality and I was pretty happy with it, although I've not yet tried it out. But on to the main reason actually why I've got it. Now, if you've listened to some of my previous videos, I've talked about what I think might be in the pond that some of the smaller fish, especially the rudd fry, are feeding on. And that primarily is microscopic crustaceans and insect larvae in the pond. Now, I'm guessed that's what they're feeding on because my fry have progressed and developed. It may just be algae that they're eating. You know, there's microscopic algae as well as the stuff we can see quite clearly. But I really want to know what else is in the pond. So that's another reason why I've got this microscope. And I am over the next few weeks going to be collecting samples from the pond and viewing them through the microscope to see what I've got in there. I spent quite a lot of time on YouTube looking at other kinds of channels that look at this sort of thing, and I think I've got a pretty good idea about how to go about it, and I will show that in a future video, obviously, as well as what I might find. Now, to the reason why most people advise you to get a microscope is parasite identification, and I do have a small concern that my fish have maybe got some parasites, and they wouldn't be alone at the moment. I think quite a lot of people are experiencing some issues with parasites as we're getting into early spring now, so I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the fish seem well, so I'm not overly worried, but I may be tempted to give one of the new fish a scrape, and maybe have a see of whether there's anything obvious going on. And I may well have to get back into treating again, which is obviously not something anyone enjoys, but I'll see how they go. I'm not that concerned at the moment, but happily this microscope will give me the answer. As I say, I'm twiddling all the buttons here without really knowing what I'm doing. I thought the service from Cuttlebrook Koi was really, really good. I ordered it and it arrived about 40 hours after I ordered it, and they emailed me all the manuals and whatnot, which I will be reading because I really do need to learn how to use the thing. I also ordered some new slides to use with it, and what I'd really like to do in the future is to get some of the attachments you can get to either use your phone or share it on a computer as well, which obviously great for the channel. Another job I've got up to, since I've got lots done, but even though I've been feeling poorly, but they've all been quite easy jobs, is just to add some bacteria gel into the moving bed. Now, I'm not sure if this is a good idea, and I'd be happy for you to kind of let me know, really. I'm not 100% that keen on whether this really works that well, and also at this time of year I'm not sure if it's a little bit too cold for them to start colonizing that well anyway. Anyway, on to the pond itself, and there you can see all the carp looking great down in the deep end of the pond. The newer ones, as I said, have darkened up. As you can tell, their colour is pretty much similar to the larger ones. If you look really closely, you can see the fry and the tench and some of the bigger rudd earlier as well, which is quite rare because you don't always see all of the fish when you look in the pond. And as you can see, the irises are growing well, and the grassier marginal plants, the ones I've cut back, are looking quite neat, and the ones I haven't are looking quite messy, which is probably an indication that I should do a little bit more cultivating of the plants. And this is the next day, and the lilies look fine. So I'm pretty pleased with all of that. Now, this last bit of footage I'm showing you is me seeing how confident the fish were to come up and feed on the surface when I'm sat really close to the pond, which again, if you've watched previous videos, is something I worked a lot on last year to try and get them to do. So I'm sat right on the edge of the pond here, and I'm throwing a couple of what are their favourite pellets in the pond to see if they'll come up. And again, if you followed the channel for a while, it's really unsurprising what is the first fish to come and show an interest, because it's the first fish that always shows an interest first, really. And it comes up pretty quickly, actually. As you'll see, here it comes. And it's the older mirror carp, who is pretty much always first on the food. and it comes up pretty relaxed. So if you throw a few more pellets in and zoom in not very expertly, and as you'll see in a minute, pretty much all the fish, certainly one of the smaller mirrors, comes up, and the large mirror mooches around and then, as normal, takes most of the pellets because that's what it always does. The smaller mirrors really like feeding under that plant. Now the common comes up quite close to me here along the bottom, but doesn't really come up to the surface, and I think that's because over the last week or so I've just been introducing them again to this kind of way of feeding and using sinking pellets. So I think it's kind of presuming that I'm sat by the pond and throwing in sinking pellets, and it's kind of sat there waiting, you know, where's my food? So it mooches off in a bit and goes and tries and find some off the surface. But they look, and I know for people who have koi this might not be that spectacular or surprising, but they're looking really confident, much more confident than the fish have ever been, really. For me, my fish tend to be quite easily spooked, which is a feature of wild strain carp compared to koi, really. So I'm pretty pleased with how happy they are with me being quite close to the pond, and especially as their appetites aren't that great at the moment. I mean, they've certainly livened up a bit, and the water temperature today, well, the day I filmed this, I think was about 9 degrees, which is, not hugely high, but for my pond it's been quite stable, sort of between I think 7 and 9 degrees, in spite of all the rain we've had and in spite of the up and down temperatures. It hasn't fluctuated too much. And as I say, the carp are, they're quite slow, which is what they're like when the water's not that warm, but they're really confident, which is great for me and bodes quite well. I think they definitely recognise, not consciously obviously, but they definitely recognise when I'm sat by the pond and I'm not going to be doing annoying things like putting pond vacs in, and when I'm sat there and I'm throwing food in. They know the difference to when I'm stood by the pond and I'm just having a look. And a lot of that's obviously, they tell that from, how quick you're moving and what you're doing, really. And they know when they want to go and hide away from you and when it's worth their while to come out and have a look at what you're doing. Their instinctive reaction now, as soon as I approach the pond, is to dart away and then double back straight away to see if I'm doing something that may involve food. Now, because I haven't thrown much food in, they've now taken to going down to the bottom to see if there's any food that's sunk down there, and they'll mooch around trying to take food off the bottom and find it amongst the algae and general detritus. But I have not been putting that much food in, which I think we'll all agree is probably sensible at this time of year. Right, so that's a quick look at the fish and the pond and the plants and my new microscope. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really hope normal service in terms of videos will be resumed next week. As I say, I'm feeling a little better, but not 100%. So I'm trying to make videos in the simplest way I can, which is chucking a camera at something and then fixing it all together and then waffling over the top. So also, thank you to everybody who's commented on my recent videos. I've not really got around to replying, but again, that's because I'm not super well, which I hope you can appreciate. But I do really appreciate all your comments, especially the few comments I got on my April Fool's video, which actually I made weeks and weeks ago, and I'd almost forgotten that I'd uploaded it. So I hope you enjoyed that as well. I really enjoyed making it. It was quite a bit of editing trickery that went into it, which I quite enjoyed, as well as a bit of probably butchering of the Japanese language that I did for the title. I'll put a link up in the corner if you've not seen that video, so you can maybe have a look at it. Right, again, thank you very much for watching. I would just point out, I was just about to close the video. Don't my carp look ace down at the bottom there? I think they're looking really good, and I can't wait to see how much they grow and develop and hopefully stay healthy through this year. But we'll see. You can have the best quality water, but fish can still get parasites and things like that. And, you know, we'll see. Hopefully it'll go really well and we'll have a good year. I hope you do too. And that's it. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.